Hi everyone, this is Giriteja, and today in this video we are going to talk about one of the caches, that is Redis. And these days companies and every startup or whatever it is, everything is behind this Redis cache. And what is so special about this? Everyone will tell that, hey, use this Redis cache, it's so fast, it fetch the data and everything. But is it a cache or is it a database? So what is what? I mean, is it a cache or is it a database? If it is database, what type of database it is? Is it a SQL database or non-SQL database, right? So these are the plenty of the questions that would come around in a fresher's mind whenever they are seeing this word Redis. They just know the basics, they don't know in detail. So that's when this video is going to help you. And what's so special about this entire Redis, right? So this is an open source one, first of all, and it is an in-memory database. I can call it as an in-memory database. What do I mean by it when I call it as in-memory database? Let us go to this Redis website and then look at its official definition. So this is the Redis website, like this is the open source one. It states that it's an open source in-memory data store used by millions of developers as a database, and we can use it as a cache, we can use it as a streaming engine and a message broker. So what do I mean by its in-memory data store is nothing but, so the data in Redis is usually stored inside the RAM of the machine. So if I'm running the Redis server in my system, then all the data that I get from the database will be stored inside my RAM. So whenever I talk about RAM is a volatile memory for sure. So whenever I close my system or whenever I restart my system, shut down my system, all the RAM will be cleared, which means like I won't have access to it. So which means like whatever the Redis stores, it's a volatile memory. But why are people still behind this? So let us understand this by using a traditional database and also the Redis. So Redis can also be used as a database for sure, but there are some pros and cons when we are using like that. So let us discuss about this basic one, wherein we are going to talk about how the traditional database works and how is Redis different from it. So this is a traditional database. We have a client, we have a server, and we have some database. Okay, and let's say I want to show some data on my client. The first thing that I do is I'll send in a request to my server. Once I send in the request from the client to the server will, in order for the server to send the data to the client, let's say I need some data from a database or some server. So I make a request to it. So which means I'm making a request from my server to the database. This can be a server or database. So it will fetch the data, it gives the response, and before it does that, it's going to perform some database operations, right? So the query parsing and then data fetching and then what is the condition. So I'll filter the data and then I'll give the response. Once I give the response, this server is going to give the same response or some modified response to the client, how it consumes. So it shows the UI. Now I reload the page, which means like I'm redoing the same stuff. So I'm sending in a request to the server will send the same request to the database or server, and it will return the same response. But what is happening here? I send the same request, I am sending the same request again, which means like the database operations here they are heavy operations, they are complex operations, but they are being done twice here, right? So which means like this complex operations is what it takes time. In the first time, let's say assume that it takes 10 seconds. In the second time also it will take 10 seconds. It's not like I'm doing something very less, right? So I'm doing the same thing. So it's going to take 10 seconds. So which means that every time I make a request, so this is going to take same amount of time to fetch the data. Similar amount of time. What happens when I use the Redis? Where does the Redis come into this play? Like this entire play, where does this Redis come? Will it come between client and server? No. We have a browser cache for that. Will it come between these two? Yes, it comes between these two. So this is how the Redis works. This looks like. So I have the same client, I have the same server. I'll send in the first request. All the database operations will be performed when I send the first request. So the difference is, like, the first time the response goes to the server back immediately, but here it goes to the server immediately first time, but the same response will also go into my Redis. This is the Redis, and when I say Redis, I am usually saying that it's the RAM of my current system, right? So it is, the response is going to be coming into my Redis, wherein the RAM and all the data will be stored as key value pairs. So we'll talk more about how the data is being stored inside Redis in the coming videos, but as of now, remember that the data is being stored as key value pairs inside this. Next time I'm reloading the page again here, just like how I did here. I'm reloading the page again, which means like I'm asking for the same response now. So which means the same request will be passed from client to server. From here, before it goes to this particular thing, like before it goes to the database, now it's gonna ask my RAM, saying that, hey RAM, do you have this request data with you? If so, please give me that, right? If so, please give me that. So currently, previously I already stored this entire response in my cache, which means like this Redis should have the same response data that the server is asking for now. So it will come to the Redis, and then the data will be present in this. So the data will be returned by Redis Cache to the server. So which means like, what is the difference? What is the difference between the second request that is happening from traditional database as well as in Redis? So in traditional database, all these database operations are complex in nature, and they are heavy. Heavy, I mean they take more time. They consume more CPU power, right? So these are being handled in traditional. Whereas here, I'm not using the server's CPU there. Instead of that, I'm using the current local machine's CPU power, right? So what is the power is? I mean, I'm using the same power, but the time that this traditional database takes to get the data will be more. But whereas here it's an in-memory, which is nothing but it is very fast. In-memory databases are very fast. So if I have something on my local system, then if I want to fetch it, it will be very fast. That is what is happening with Redis. So every time I make another request, or if I make some one more request, then it will be stored in this particular Redis. So I will get the data immediately. So the Redis is mainly used for whenever you are fetching some data frequently. Once I'm getting, now after 5 seconds I need the data again. After 10 seconds I need the data again. Then the Redis cache is gonna be saving a lot of time for you, and the users will have very great experience. Because in this time, user has to wait so many seconds in order for the UI to show up. But whereas here it will be very fast. Let's say if it takes some 5 seconds, it will take only 1 second to fetch the data from the second time. For the first time, it will take the same data, same amount of time. That you have to keep in mind. And what are the other benefits that Redis has? Redis has its own hashing mechanism, and it is very powerful whenever it comes to giving the response, right? So it is almost 30 to 40 times faster than the traditional database. So that is more about this Redis fundamentals. And the next video we will be talking about how do we set up this Redis in our local environment, how do we use the functionalities that Redis provides, how do we store this key value pairs inside my Redis, right? So we'll discuss all that. Until then, take care, bye bye.